Welcome to Planet People, a podcast that aims to inspire curiosity and cultivate a deeper connection with the natural world.
We are thrilled to be sharing stories with you that highlight the beauty and importance of protecting our planet's wildlife.
Be sure to follow us on social media and your favorite podcast streaming platform so that you never miss an episode. Hi, Coral.
Good morning, Natalie.
Hello, my dear. My lovely Coral, my baby girl. I'm happy we are recording. We're so close to being done with season 2, and we really hope you guys like what we have in store for you. So.
Yeah. And what Natalie means by that is we're almost done recording. We have a few straggler episodes that we need to get done. But I mean, for the most part, like we have season 2 in the bag, which has been really wonderful. And this guest is a huge, wonderful part of that, one that you have actually worked with in the past before, Katie Shaw with the Living Desert Zoo.
Yeah, I'm excited. Katie Shaw is great at what she does. She is a conservation social scientist, and that means she really takes a look at human behavior and how it's impacting the environment and trying to reverse that behavior through community-based conservation initiatives, which we talk a lot about on the show today, and the different campaigns that she is helping lead under the guidance of Dr. Denofberg, who is also someone I've met at the Living Desert Zoo, and he is the conservation director at the Living Desert Zoo. And so they have been a huge source of inspiration for me doing conservation work in a community level. And I won't give away the name of the campaign in our intro because we talk a lot about it, but I had the pleasure of working on it and learning about the ways that we can kind of change our behavior to better the environment.
Also, what I love about this episode and why it's coming out right after Tim Shields' episode is because it's a different solution to the same problem, which is this human raven tortoise issue that we see, that we go so in depth about with Tim Shields and his approach with technology, and then Katie and the Living Desert Zoo's approach with going right to the source of the problem, which is to talk to humans about their impact and what they're doing and how they are subsidizing these ravens and what they can do differently, and how tourists can also make a difference when they're in the desert. Even if you're there for a weekend, you can make a huge difference by choosing which restaurants you're going to, who you're supporting there. And yeah, it's wonderful to see all these different types of solutions for one problem, because usually that's the case for anything that's going to get done. There has to be multiple solutions happening all at the same time to really make that positive impact.
Absolutely. And I'm just so proud of you for how you presented that information just now, because at the beginning of our discussion with Tim Shields, subsidies and this whole complex between the tortoise and the raven and humans is quite literally the perfect example of a social ecological issue where we see humans interacting with the environment in a negative way. And so it's the solutions in place that can reverse that behavior and the problem, really. And you did a great job of explaining it. I'm just proud of you. And I hope that everyone else listening understands just how important these solutions are from the Tim Shields perspective of using conservation technologies, and from the Living Desert Zoo, where they present community-based conservation solutions as well as captive breeding efforts. So that's another third solution at play here. And these are the things that give me hope. These conversations light me up because there's so many people passionate about protecting the desert tortoise, which is the California state reptile. And like you said, we need many solutions in place to tackle this very daunting threat to the desert tortoise. So we really get into it today, and we hope you guys like it.
Yeah. So what's the breath of fresh air for you for this episode?
For this episode, I would say my breath of fresh air would be visiting the Bighorn Sheep Cafe at the Living Desert Zoo. because you can actually sit there at the base of this beautiful mountain that's part of this natural exhibit where you can see bighorn sheep quite literally walking up the hill. And you're just sitting there drinking your coffee, and these icons of the desert are like watching over you with their big horns. It's so magical. It's like that's how the desert's supposed to look.
That's so cool. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
it's so cool. We need to go. We're doing a
Yeah.
Planet People road trip there. If
Yes.
anyone listening wants to come, let us know.
Yeah, I love that.
What's your breath of fresh air, Coral?
So it's kind of the opposite of yours in terms of climate because we actually recorded this episode while Natalie and I were in Hawaii on a little girls' trip. Um, so we were in Hawaii and it was a really wonderful trip because we were actually not working. We had to challenge ourselves not to work. We have gone on so many different work trips for Planet People, and we had this opportunity to go to Hawaii, and we just took it as a relaxing trip for the both of us. And we did a little working, obviously, because we recorded this episode with Katie Shaw while we were there. But it was just wonderful to record the episode and then step outside and boom, we're in Hawaii. And we got to walk so many wonderful beaches. We got to go to the North Shore, do some cliff jumping. So
That was the
that's
time of our life. That
that's
was
what this
so
episode
fun.
weirdly reminds me of, because even though we're talking about desert climates and we're in like a tropical one, but it was a nice time.
It was nice until I came home and realized I had pneumonia. So it's okay though.
You win some, you lose some.
You win some, you lose some. It was a great trip, and I definitely cannot wait to go back. Sneak peek of a possible Hawaii season. Are we
Yeah.
manifesting that? Yes.
Hell yeah. Well, Freak or Force, we've already kind of covered ravens and we're going to cover tortoises in a different episode. So don't really know what to say here, but maybe we can talk about the Living Desert Zoo as a whole. Like, I think that they're a force of nature because they have so many different exhibits that you can check out all across the world. They have all of the deserts of the world, which is really cool. All right there in Southern California that you can check out.
Yeah, they are a force of nature, huh? I appreciate that you provided the whole picture of the Living Desert Zoo and how they're working across so many different arid desert environments, not just locally in California, but globally. And they have these different hubs that represent that. They have the African savanna, they have the Mongolian exhibit, Australia, the Great Outback. Like, I love the Living Desert Zoo, so I cannot recommend it enough. If you are listening and you ever visit Coachella Valley, check them out. They're in Palm Desert, and they just have so much cool wildlife. So go out there and get inspired.
I just want to quickly acknowledge my voice. I have lost my voice over the past weekend. I'm drinking lots of tea and honey to be able to do this conversation, but I might be taking a little more of a backseat today. But yes, it's me, Natalie, and Katie Shaw. We're very excited for this episode. And Natalie and Katie actually know each other. Natalie, do you want to tell our listeners how you guys first met and your work together?
Yeah, definitely. Hey, Planet People, welcome back. We're really excited to be here today with Katie Shaw, a conservation social scientist with the Living Desert Zoo based out of Palm Desert in Southern California. And Katie and I actually had the great opportunity of running into each other at a conference in San Francisco for the Wildlife Conservation Network. They have an annual conference every year where I met Katie and her boss, Dr. Denofberg. And since then, we've been able to form a relationship. And I actually had the pleasure of working under one of their community-based conservation programs as a volunteer. And we'll talk a little bit about that today. It's called Time to Talk Trash. But before we get into it, Katie, welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at the Living Desert Zoo?
Oh, yeah. Thanks so much. Happy to be here today. Share about some of the work that we do, and yeah, that you graciously helped out on and wrote an awesome op-ed piece on. If folks want to check that out online.
So, what is the Living Desert Zoo? And paint a picture of what this Living Desert Zoo is for our audience that may not have visited there before.
Yeah, so we are, as you said, located in Southern California in the Coachella Valley. We are pretty close to where the Sonoran and Mojave deserts meet. So it is, as our name implies, a desert ecosystem, which I think a lot of people think is kind of like a barren, empty ecosystem. And we're really working at the zoo to try and change that and to let people know that this area is actually one of the most biodiverse areas in the country. There is a lot of life here. And like a lot of places now, unfortunately, there's a lot of change happening that's impacting that life. But yeah, so our zoo is focused on desert or semi-arid ecosystems because it gets unbearably hot here in the summer. All of our animals are heat adapted animals. It would not be kind or make sense for us to have penguins in our 120-degree summers. Um, so all animals that are adapted to live in this heat, and then of course we help make them more comfortable. But just trying to showcase these different species and allow our guests to learn about them, connect with them, and really create a point of caring about them and wanting to be stewards of the environment and work for the conservation of these different species.
And what different species do you guys have primarily at the Living Desert Zoo?
Yeah, so we've got it broken up into sections geographically at the zoo. So we have a whole Africa section. We've got black rhinos. We do a lot of conservation work with some partners in Africa involving black rhinos. We've got giraffes, painted dogs. Again, for each of those, we have partners in Africa that we work with for conservation in the field for these animals. We also have a North American section at the zoo. We've got like the very endangered Mexican wolf, letting people know about their plight, how they were almost became extinct here, and the work that our zoo is really one of the leading forces in the breeding program for them, bringing them back from seven in the wild up to a couple hundred today. Other local species for people to learn about, again, to dispel this myth that the desert is empty and that they live amongst all of these amazing species. And then we've got an Australian section as well, since so much of that country is very arid, desert-like.
So highlighting deserts like globally as well as the Coachella Valley as well. Very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we're actually a botanical garden as well. And so we have um, gardens that represent deserts from all over the country and the world. And I feel like our plants are, sometimes kind of unsung compared to some of the exciting animals, but we really have some spectacular gardens, about 60 of them, I believe, showcasing, again, the diversity of life in all different desert ecosystems.
And what's the best time for our listeners to visit the Living Desert Zoo if they want to?
Not in the summer.
Yeah.
Yes, it gets extremely hot here.
How hot are we talking?
It can get up to 125 here in the summer. Yeah. And so, yeah, definitely recommend coming. I'd say like November through April. It's beautiful here then. So,
I was just going to say one of my favorite parts about the zoo, just to your point about the botanical gardens, are walking around just the whole premise of the zoo. It's such a beautiful, like, experience. The foliage is so alive. And that's why I think the name is so fitting because when you're walking through, it does really feel like it's a living desert in action. And with that beautiful like hiking trail behind the zoo too, that's such a cool part of being able to visit the living desert.
yeah, we've got a about 1,100 acre nature preserve that the zoo cares for, that is attached to the zoo. So in our peak season when it's not 120 degrees, there's a hiking trail where you can go back. I think it's about 5 miles or so and do a loop back in the nature preserve. It takes you back into the mountains that are right behind us. And you can just spend some time in the ecosystem, see some of the wild animals that we talk about in the zoo.
Yeah, it's a fascinating part to me because, you're actually walking through these exhibits and then you can go experience some of those local animals you have on exhibit literally in the preserve behind
Yeah.
the zoo. It's so cool. The Living Desert Zoo, I think, is my favorite zoo in Southern California.
Awesome.
And that's coming from being in San Diego, where the San Diego Zoo is also really nice.
Yes, tough competition there.
Yeah, Southern California has great zoos. I'm a big fan. Yeah. I'm excited to get into all of the fun things that you guys do with the Living Desert at the zoo and in the field. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at the Living Desert Zoo?
Yeah, so I'm, as you said, a conservation social scientist, which means that I work on all of our conservation projects that have to do with people in some capacity. Um, and so we've got a whole conservation department at the Living Desert Zoo. I've got many colleagues that work on the biological and ecological side of various conservation projects and problems. But I think it's important that there's a growing wave in the field of acknowledging that people are a key part of this complex puzzle with a lot of our conservation issues. Ultimately, people are the source of the problem a lot of times, unfortunately. And so involving people is in the solution is going to be necessary to address these issues. You can think of it as conservation psychology almost, to work with people for various education, outreach, and importantly, a lot of behavior change.
We talk a lot about community-based conservation. So Natalie was telling me a little bit about the program that she worked with you on, and that you guys continue. I love the name.
Time to talk trash.
Time to talk trash. I think it's a clever name, and it's one that we need to talk about. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot take credit for the name. It actually started before I was at the zoo with my predecessor. But it was a project that I was very happy to kind of reinvigorate post-COVID, and just continue expanding and improving on. And it's really grown from the specific focus that it started with that we can talk about into this much greater desert tortoise conservation project.
Yeah, so what is the Time to Talk Trash and how is it implementing community-based conservation on the ground for a positive impact for desert species, including the tortoise?
Yeah, so this program grew out of the need for raven management strategies for desert tortoise conservation. Ravens are the top predator of the desert tortoise. They can peck through their shells until they're about 5. And so the juvenile survival rate to adulthood is only about 1 to 2%. And it's having devastating impacts on the desert tortoise populations. They've declined by over 40% in the Western Mojave in the past few decades. And so a number of different agencies and organizations that work on desert tortoise conservation are looking at different ways to address raven management. So you talked with Tim Shields, who has a lot of technological ideas and advances. And there's other agencies working on other aspects of it, but we wanted to address the source of the problem, really, which is the reason we have this overpopulation, this significant overpopulation of ravens, is because they're getting food and water subsidies and roosting sites from people. Right. So ravens are native to the deserts, but with what the desert provides naturally, their numbers would be fairly limited, and there would be this balance in the ecosystem. With the presence of as many people that are now living in the deserts, they're getting all this extra food, water, places to build nests, such as billboards, light posts, and it's allowed this explosion in their numbers, and this population that's grown to be, in some areas, over 800% higher than it should be naturally. Um, and so again, there's different ways to address this, and I think they're all necessary for a complex problem like this. But we did want to make sure that we were addressing this human element and looking at the fact that this population overgrowth is from people. And so Time to Chalk Trash really grew out of that and looking at how can we work with people to reduce the food subsidies that is allowing this raven population to just keep growing and growing and growing, and then as a result, causing this terrible crash in the tortoise population. Um, and so this is a community outreach campaign where we work with residents in communities surrounding desert tortoise habitat. And then it grew into our Ravens and Restaurants program, which works directly with food-related businesses as a major source of food waste. And so working with them to kind of address that like low-hanging fruit of these massive food waste dumpsters, basically being raven buffets. Uh, like I said, my predecessor started this, and then I've since picked up this work post-COVID, and we've worked in a number of communities at this point, from Desert Hot Springs up to north of Joshua Tree and 29 Palms, Yucca, Joshua Tree Town. We've expanded up to Barstow, Victorville, Apple Valley, really all these key population areas surrounding these different critical habitat units for desert tortoises that are serving as these major food sources for ravens.
And a year ago, I was in the field with you, seeing firsthand how you deployed this community-based conservation program. And since then, it seems like you have definitely expanded past Yucca Valley and the Coachella Valley. Are these new desert communities that you have reached, including Barstow and Victorville, has that all been part of the expansion in the last year since I was out there?
Yeah, yep. So we got a grant to do desert tortoise conservation up in the greater Barstow region because Barstow is basically surrounded by critical habitat units for the desert tortoise. And then the whole Victorville, Apple Valley, Hesperia metropolitan area, huge population just to the west of some of the critical habitat units. So that's why that's become a big focus with a grant from the National Fish and Wildlife
Oh,
Foundation.
great.
Like I said, we're figuring out how to expand the project so that it's not remaining stagnant and we're using what we learn to try and get more and different data that can help us with this. So Natalie, you joined when we were working in the communities north of Joshua Tree National Park. And from some of the work there, we started to see the influence of what is Senate Bill 1383, which
Okay.
was the implementation of the organic waste and the compost bins, right? And so we started to notice that that was having an impact on our efforts because now we needed to see if they closed both a dumpster and an organic waste bin. And so it was actually twice the effort. And so we noticed that once we got up into Barstow and Victorville, we were starting to see slightly smaller behavior change results, likely due to
Interesting.
this extra effort.
So would you say that introduction of the compost bin created sort of a challenge for you guys then with rewarding those restaurants? What behavior change were you seeing?
Again, and this is where the importance of just going out and collecting data, rigorous, like scientific data rather than just anecdotal observations, where we were able to analyze the data and then actually found that most businesses are pretty good about keeping the organic waste bin closed. But we noticed that there was a decrease in those businesses closing their dumpsters. And
Interesting.
so, working to uh, evolve our messaging so that we were able to share when we're still seeing ravens out in the field, they've been on dumpsters still. People are still throwing food waste in there, or there's like remains on wrappers or whatnot. And so the dumpsters are still very much acting as a source of food, even if a lot of the food is made it into the organic waste bin. And so, looking at some of the challenges that might come with closing dumpsters, the food waste bins are those plastic standalone bins on wheels, very easy to close the lid. The dumpsters are obviously much bigger, heavier lid, often in corrals where the lid gets pinned between the corral and the dumpster, so it's very difficult to close. So just looking at all these different factors that might influence or impede the behavior change we're hoping for.
Natalie mentioned something that I want to give more context to our listeners about the gold star standard. Can you guys talk a little bit about what that means and that positive reinforcement element to this program?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so that became kind of a subset of this project with our Gold Star Award, which is what we created for businesses who are regularly keeping their dumpsters closed and clean. So what we do as part of this project is we go around and we do observations to collect our data on whether dumpsters are opened or closed because we found when you talk to people, they they think their dumpster is closed or they're pretty sure someone did it or and so often they'll say, oh yeah, ours is always closed. But to get the most accurate data, we wanted to observe the actual behavior. So we go around 5 times and record whether a dumpster is opened or closed, whether the food waste is opened or closed, whether there's food waste on the ground around it. And then we've got this baseline data out of these 5 visits. And then we go around and we do interventions at each of the businesses where we ask to speak to managers. We chat with them about the relationship with accessible food waste, ravens, and the desert tortoise. How they can help simply by keeping their dumpsters and food waste bins closed. Beyond the health codes that require this, it does also help keep the ecosystem in balance. There's different motivations for restaurants, so we can point out it does help just keep their restaurant clean. We don't have ravens spreading trash across the parking lots. And just chat with them about the desert tortoise decline and really just create some awareness because we realize this is not an intuitive relationship between a dumpster and the desert tortoise. So just letting folks know about that relationship. And so, yeah, I ask them to talk to their staff. We give them some flyers to hang up as visual reminders. We give them some more information as some talking points for their staff. Um, and then after we do those interventions, we go around and we do 5 more dumpster surveys to see if they're open or closed and to assess our level of behavior change that we're seeing. Um, and so if a restaurant has their dumpster closed and clean at least 80% of the time, so at least 4 of those 5 visits, then we award them with a Gold Star Award. And that is this award that we've created with various public-facing materials. There's stickers for restaurants to put on their windows. There's table toppers for either the by the cashier or on the tables people sit at. And we put their name on our website, coveryourtrash.org. We've got all our Gold Star Award recipients listed there. But the idea is to share this information with the public and to create this like expectation of continuing the desired behavior. And then it also becomes a social norming tool, right? And so if nearby restaurants all have Gold Star Awards and this one restaurant does not, we're hoping that, you know, customers will see, well, why aren't you guys achieving this? Why haven't you gotten this? And it's motivation to do this behavior and achieve that status as an environmentally friendly organization. So,
My next question was if you guys had stickers to give them. So I love that you
yeah.
already answered, and yes, because I do think that makes a difference. Something to have like on your window, and like you were saying, the customer is able to see like, oh, what is this? Like I feel like everyone is always looking at the star ratings, like whether it be reviews or, anything on the front door to entice them to trust to eat there, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I remember seeing the first time I ever went to Joshua Tree, I stopped by the Roadrunner Cafe and I noticed they had that gold star recipient like pamphlet on one of their countertops. And I immediately was intrigued by it. And I read the statistics about ravens. And from there, I mean, that really sparked my interest in learning more about the Time to Talk Trash. Obviously, I was part of the program for a couple days there as a volunteer. And so I think it does make a difference to, at least for me, and other people coming in to see that, oh, this is a highly, rated establishment that does care about protecting the environment, even though this intricacy of closing the dumpster doesn't necessarily tie to protecting the desert tortoise it's not something that people would think of right away. But when you have that pamphlet there, it's also in educational for people like me and Coral who just are going to visit, and it definitely makes a difference. So I think it's great.
It's like the straw with the turtle pamphlets that was like in every single restaurant for a while there. And so like you guys are doing the same with tortoises, which is great because not many people know of the threats that's happening. And it seems, I mean, I could be wrong. Is it a higher
Yeah.
decline than
Uh,
turtles?
I mean, just from talking to people out in the communities regularly about this topic, there's a lot of people that are unaware of the relationship between the raven and the desert tortoise, um, and then unaware of the relationship between humans and the raven population. And so people just, don't have any idea. It's just like not, like I said, it's not intuitive. It wouldn't cross your mind to think like, oh, I like left this apple core out and people don't realize like each little action like that, each dumpster that's open is just providing additional food for a species that I don't think a lot of people even realize is a top predator of the desert tortoise. And so part of it is designed really just to be this very specific call to action to help to do something that, doesn't take much time or effort on people's parts, closing the dumpsters, right? Um, is something that restaurants generally want to do anyway to look like a clean and reputable establishment. And then just letting folks know, like, there are ways that you can help. It doesn't have to be anything huge, but like little things like this do add up.
What is it like working on the ground with restaurant owners, and how do they receive your outreach for this campaign?
Yeah, I mean, people have generally been good to work with in that there's, again, when you work with people, expect the entire spectrum. And there's some people I think that are maybe less interested in what we're saying, and that might just be because they're understaffed or stressed or whatever the reason may be. But there's a lot of folks that just simply didn't know about the relationship, like I said, and were interested to learn about it. And, we're able to highlight this very easy thing that they can do that not only helps the ecosystem and the desert tortoise, but I think also just as a business helps them in maintaining their appearance and their cleanliness. And a lot of people that were like fairly passionate about it because there's a lot of folks that like have pet desert tortoises. They've got the permit for it, or that just love them, and that, get excited about a simple way they can help protect them. And so there's been a lot of people that have been pretty enthusiastic. And then, of course, folks that receive a Gold Star Award. It's always great to be recognized for doing something, for helping in some way. And so people are generally very appreciative of that. So.
I found that people were pretty receptive when I was doing outreach, and it's the curiosity element of it. Oh, there, some people don't even know that there are tortoises around, right?
Yep.
And that they're the state reptile. And I think there's this norm that we're so used to seeing so many ravens now, so we don't think twice about it too. And that's where it might not be intuitive that they are actually a predator because of their, invasive presence now. While they were their natural or native species to the desert, they're kind of a native invasive now because of that population really explosion in the last couple of decades. So I think it's great that you can kind of, immediately tell people when you go inside, like, here's a photo of a raven, right? We had that little flyer with the raven and the baby tortoise in its mouth, and that immediately is like, oh my gosh, it just draws you in. And so I just found that was a refreshing experience that people were, and generally pretty receptive, even though if they were busy and kind of understaffed, they never shoot us away completely, right? Which I feel like is a good starting point.
Yeah, almost everyone was polite and but yeah, I think you make a good point. Like a lot of people just aren't aware and are curious then.
There is something to think about as a restaurant owner when you guys come and, inform them of this program and invite them into it. Like this is coming from, I've worked in the service industry for 10 plus years, and I'm just thinking about all of the trips to the dumpster. Like that's my side work, taking the trash out to the dumpster. I can barely even reach the top of the dumpster. Like it needs to be open for me because I'm gonna have to like swing it over to get in there. And then like you're saying, there's a lot of times these like enclosed, I don't even know how to explain it. Like it's not fully enclosed, but it has like essentially three walls. And so sometimes you can't access that side door that you're supposed to access to then throw the trash in there. So it makes restaurant owners more aware of the situation and like who is taking the trash out and their staff. How can I make it easier for them? So I like that this program probably also like makes restaurant owners think about how it can be a little bit easier, more accessible for the staff. Because I mean, like, I can't tell you how many times I had to like jump and I'm like holding this disgusting trash and like this trash juice gets on me. Like, you know what I mean? It's disgusting.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
there's a
that's
lot to
not
think
ideal
about.
for anyone.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, and it also uh, it it highlights how like people can be creative problem solvers as well, and really how much of a wicked problem, a complex problem this is, where when we did our dumpster surveys in Victorville, we had a really surprising results where our baseline dumpster closure rates were higher than in other communities even after we did the intervention there. So before we did the intervention in Victorville, the dumpsters were already closed more than in other places after the interventions. And we were like, what's going on here? Um, and so we actually started collecting some additional data at that point. And we started doing interviews with staff and asking about motivations and looking at different infrastructural setups. And we found that in Victorville, so many more places had these fully raven-proof enclosures around the dumpsters. And there's different versions of it. Some of them are like the corrugated metal. Some of them are just like a chain link fence around it. But we actually, again, we didn't want it to just be anecdotal. So we went back and collected the data on it. And we found that in Victorville, 39% of the surveyed businesses have a fully raven-proof enclosure compared to about 9% in the communities north of Joshua Tree and Barstow. And so we realized, okay, so it looks like in this case, like this infrastructural support is going to be huge because, like you're saying, dumpsters, like, if there's workers and they're busy and they can't reach and they're in a rush to get back to their tables or whatnot, those can all just be challenges that add up to all these dumpsters just being left open. But if you provide a raven-proof enclosure where it doesn't matter if you leave the dumpster lid open as long as you lock or shut the gate and lock the gate on the way out, then we're able to see this desired behavior change a lot more. So there's different ways to think about the problem too. And another thing that we heard from doing interviews with staff was in some areas, there's like really big issues with the homeless population rooting through dumpsters looking for stuff, which is frustrating for the restaurant owners because it'll often mean that there's trash like dispersed across their parking lot, and it just doesn't look cleanly or nice on the behalf of the restaurant. And so this is one way to keep those areas secure. It saves them staff time of having to continually clean up additional messes. So there's a benefit for the restaurant as well. So looking at maybe some infrastructural changes that could be implemented in the future to support the desired behavior change.
You totally led into what I was going to ask you next is if you've seen these sort of like structural solutions because while we were talking, I was like, I don't know, maybe like buildings should have spikes on their roofs or like,
There are a
I
lot
don't know.
of, that's a way to deter birds is putting spikes on the top of a structure so that they don't nest and perch on top of whatever it is you're trying to deter them from. Is that a potential solution for infrastructure? Like putting spikes
I mean,
on?
I think that would work for deterring some of the nesting that we're seeing. But I think in terms of reducing food access, you would need some sort of fully enclosed corral. Again, whether it be like an actual building or simply just like an extension of a chain link fence that goes all around it. Either, I mean, whichever structure people choose, as long as the idea is that an employee can just shut a gate, lock a gate, and it keeps various critters out and helps just keep that area locked up, clean as they leave it.
Have you heard any rumblings, like on a legal level, of requiring this as a business owner, or?
I've had very, very preliminary discussions with someone in Barstow, but this was all data that was collected fairly recently, kind of realizing the impact of these fully enclosed corrals. And so still kind of in initial stages with that and need to figure out the best way to proceed with that. But I think letting people know is a really important part of that because if people are aware and are able to request this from the city, that's when we're going to see changes at that like greater regulatory and municipal level. And so, we need people as advocates for these changes for them to get implemented. And so, if you we have some fantastic volunteers at the zoo, and we have one woman that reached out to me about this one shopping center that was continually leaving their dumpster open, and so she ended up calling like a health code citation in, and like just people need to like make their voices heard and communities will listen to their residents and so hopefully this is a really great way to get the word out and maybe get some support for this idea of making it more regulatory.
Well, I think it's really interesting that you mentioned Victorville of all places saw this 39%. Was it a decrease in, or it was the closures because of the infrastructure, right?
Yeah, 39% of the places that we were working with had the fully enclosed raven-proof corrals.
I'm curious to know if there's a positive correlation. I guess it's probably too early to tell if that is benefiting tortoises directly in the Victorville area, in those critical habitat zones around Barstow. Because I know that they're kind of, there's the highways that break up those critical habitats, but in general, those desert areas around Barstow and Victorville have a very high density of tortoises. So I'm curious if this Victorville, with them being more conscious about having these enclosures is actually benefiting the animals around that area, and we just don't know it yet.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. It's hard, like desert tortoise conservation is such a long game,
It's a
right?
long game.
Because they don't even hit, tortoises don't even hit reproductive age until they're about 15 or so. So trying to see like generational population impacts is not something that happens quickly overnight. And it's really something that, like you have to work at it, but you can't expect to see instant results. They're just such a slow species in so many senses, right? Even like reproductively. And so it's hard to say, and it's hard to take one action or one initiative and say this directly correlates with this result, right? But it is really encouraging that, like I said, we view this aspect and this social science and community outreach as one piece of the puzzle for raven management. Um, and then we've got folks like Tim Shields out there using technological deterrence. We've got governmental agencies that are doing egg oiling, where they use drones to spray eggs with oil so that they don't hatch. We've got government agencies also taking down nests that are spotted. Um, and so it's all these little things together. And with all of these different pieces, we have seen a decrease in raven density in the Western Mojave um, over the past few years. And so I don't think we can say it's because of this exactly or because of that exactly, but I think this like comprehensive and kind of holistic approach to raven management, where we're targeting multiple different like uh, facets
Angles.
of it, and
Yeah,
yeah, I think that we're seeing overall we are seeing a trend in the right direction now with these raven densities, and that's really exciting and that's encouraging.
definitely encouraging. That's positive news for the
Yeah.
show today, for sure, because it's daunting hearing about these complex threats that tortoises face from ravens, from habitat development. There's a whole gauntlet of threats that tortoises face, and it's definitely cool to see all of these. Well, to really, for me to meet so many different conservation scientists in the space using different solutions and tools to kind of come at it from this holistic approach, like you were saying, and seeing a decline in raven presence is definitely encouraging.
Yeah, I think it's so important to keep that in mind because I mean, with like most conservation issues, there's no silver bullet, there's no easy fix, there's no, we do this one thing and that solves our problem, right? It's generally a complex problem, and you have to expect to see incremental progress, especially when working with people with behavior
I
change.
was just about to ask you about the people component.
Yeah, behavior change with people is always going to be incremental. It's always going to be a long-term project, a long-term goal you're working towards. You're never going to hit 100%, right? But you that doesn't mean you can't make a difference still. And so we were seeing about a 10% increase in dumpster closures after our interventions, initially with Time to Talk Trash. And then, like I said, the organic waste bins added an extra layer to it. So seeing more like a 7% increase in closures between both the dumpster and the food waste bins at places. And so yeah, it's that incremental change. That is that many fewer days where ravens have these free for all buffets to just feast on and continue expanding their population. And so we've got, that on one hand, plus all of these other projects that our partners are working on. And again, it's coming together that we start to see this change. So another big part of the project that we're doing up by Barstow is working with the off-roading community for desert tortoise conservation.
Cool.
Um, so doing a lot of education and outreach with off-roaders because there's several off-roading areas that are adjacent to or some limited use areas that are in desert tortoise habitat.
Literally in the desert tortoise habitat. Yeah.
Yes. And so, um, but yeah, that was one of the most surprising things for me, getting into that domain was just the number of off-roaders that I've spoken to that just
Hmm.
didn't even realize the desert tortoise lives where they're recreating. And how can you
Be mad at
expect
them.
people to take
Yeah.
precautions or act accordingly if they
Yeah.
don't even know the species is there. So just letting folks know, like, hey, you're right next to this critical habitat unit. Here's some easy things you can do to help the desert tortoise while you're out riding.
So, what are some things that off-roaders can do?
Yeah, so some of our main messaging, I started really emphasizing like you're in desert tortoise country, keep an eye out for them. But beyond that, just staying on designated trails. So there's less of a chance of hitting them, of crushing their burrows, of crushing all of the little plants they need to survive. If you do see one, please let it be. We don't want uh, if you're going over and interacting with the tortoises, they can get scared and then they can void their bladders. And that's all water that they save up to survive the summer. So that can be really detrimental for them. There's also like a potential for disease exchange. So again, it's beneficial for the people as well to just, take a picture, but let them be. And then another thing is incorporating some of that talk trash messaging and letting people know the importance of proper food and waste disposal. Because I think there's a lot of folks that think like, you eat an apple and you toss that, and it's an organic thing. It'll decompose and stuff. But just letting folks know that it probably won't decompose because it'll get eaten by a raven before it has a chance to. And it's just contributing to that cycle that we've been talking about. So.
Is there any sort of initiative to add signage, along these off-roading sites or trails about like trash with ravens, making sure that people are aware that they are in these desert habitats with tortoises?
Yeah, there's definitely been talk about signage. It's just always a matter of finding funding for projects. Um, Signage can be great, but we've been doing more in-person outreach. That's been our focus with the OHV or the off-highway vehicle users. And so my colleagues and I have been going to various off-roading events, and we've had all these crazy stickers made with desert tortoises. And so we're giving those out to folks as like a visual reminder that after we let them know that they're in desert tortoise habitat, having that like discussion with them about a couple ways they can help. I think connecting with folks can sometimes have a more lasting impression than just a sign. And so, I mean, it'd be great to see more signage clarifying some of this as well. But I think, talking to folks, making that connection, and giving them some really specific calls to action on ways they can help is also really important.
You talking about that off-roading event made me immediately think about Burning Man. And
Yeah.
I wonder what actions are in place for Burning Man for conservation or what that impact looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been to Burning Man, but I have heard that there is like an extensive cleanup that they have to do afterwards, as part of their agreement with the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, to continue using the land. And similarly, King of the Hammers is on BLM land, and so there's a lot of BLM presence and enforcement, and similarly some cleanup efforts after these events. To, I mean, there's still a huge impact ecologically, but to try and mitigate some of the impacts.
It's good to know that BLM has these requirements. So, do desert tortoises have zoonotic diseases that can be transferred to us or vice versa?
Yeah, so they can carry salmonella, which I think is a pretty common one that people know to steer clear of. But then we can also transmit upper respiratory infections to them. And if we transmit that to a wild tortoise and then they go and interact with other wild tortoises, it can just spread through that population and have some pretty devastating effects. So
Okay.
another point that we try and share with folks is, like I said, there's a number of people that have desert tortoises as pets. So letting them know if you have a pet, great, please keep taking good care of it. If you're unable to take care of it, please don't release it into the wild, because it might be a carrier of a disease like that. And so the Living Desert has taken some tortoises in. To avoid that situation, and we care for them. And then we try and adopt them out to folks that are interested in having a desert tortoise that go through the permitting process. We've got one that's our little ambassador that comes out to schools to do outreach with us.
That Mojave Maxine.
That's a whole separate project actually that the zoo's done.
The
But
ambassador is not Mojave, though. Mojave Maxine.
No,
Oh,
no, the
okay.
ambassador, her name is Beetlejuice. And she's a very charismatic little
Is
tortoise.
that right?
And yeah, we've done presentations for students in schools, and she comes and we set up a little pen for her to walk around and eat some flowers, and that way the kids get to see a desert tortoise up close, and hopefully form more of a connection with the species.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
We love our ambassadors. We had an episode come out recently with Alex Wild, and we were in the San Elijo Lagoon, and they have a desert tortoise ambassador that actually used to be his pet. So,
Oh, cool.
yeah, Franklin. We had a good time with Franklin.
Yeah, they can be such a great way of letting people connect with a species, and develop like that deeper level of like empathy and wanting to help them and wanting to protect them.
Before we continue in this direction about tortoises and the Living Desert Zoo, because I do want to hit on one program, Natalie, that you were talking to me about last night, that you guys are doing. So if an off-roader is in a situation where they need to maybe relocate a tortoise, what do you tell them? What's the proper way, especially if there are these zoonotic disease potentials? And Natalie, this kind of goes into the work that you do with relocating on these construction sites. But what is the proper way for somebody that is just a regular person going out for some fun?
Yeah, I mean, I talk to off-roaders all the time that have seen them on the trail and are understandably concerned about them. And so just say, if they're in the middle of a trail and for the tortoise's safety, you want to move them off, just minimal contact, just move them off to the side of the trail, right? You don't need to like point them away from it, so that they keep walking away from the trail, but just move them off to the side. And when you move them, I tell people stay like low and slow, right? Keep the tortoise low to the ground, move slowly so that you don't startle them and they void their bladder. And then just as little contact as needed to get them out of harm's way, so that, you can carry on riding and the tortoise is in a safer place.
And Natalie, you've told me in the past that you rehydrate them. Like how is somebody supposed to do that?
When I was in the field doing more hands-on research, we would create a small divot in the sand and place like a trash bag around the divot and add a little bit of water in it. So it's a shallow pool of water, and then you place the tortoise inside. And the tortoise will suck up the water through its nares. It's how it consumes water. And just kind of let it sit and bathe in the water for, 30 minutes. And then you let them back, you release them back into the environment. And usually we're always wearing gloves. And so that was part of my question for people listening that, might be on the trail. Let's say an off-roader is tuning in and they don't have gloves on. Is that a concern to you, Katie, if they need to move it out of harm's way? Would you recommend that they usually try to have something on their hands?
I mean, if you can, that's great. That's with a tortoise like right in the middle of an off-road trail, it becomes a situation of touching them isn't ideal, but it's better than them getting run over. And so, and off-roaders are concerned about that. They don't want to hit wildlife, right? And so at that point, it becomes kind of like, all right, well, ultimately, a quick little move is going to be better than the tortoise getting run over. But like I said, the ideal is just to let them be. Um, I mean, these are creatures that have lived for eons
They're
here in the desert, with
dinosaurs.
um, and they know how to survive. And with the proper habitat and minimal interference, they're able to do what they need to do to survive on their own. And so the reason we have to step in now is because of all these challenges they're facing that we've created. And so, yeah, but when possible, if you're out riding and you're like in or near one of these critical habitat units, that's been designated as a place that is an ideal like habitat for desert tortoise. They should theoretically have what they need to survive there. And so really it's just letting them do what they've evolved to do and what they know how to do.
Definitely. So, sort of to the bigger picture of the program, it seems that you guys are bridging environmental science with community engagement. How do you approach conservation as a social challenge rather than just an environmental one?
I mean, I think it has to be looked at as both to have any sort of long-term impact or success. Like I've said, like people are causing the environmental challenges, so people also need to be the solution to these problems. Working holistically, remembering that like one single project or action is probably not going to solve an entire problem. But I think like one example with the desert tortoise is, you can do both the biological and ecological work and the community engagement and really have them work hand in hand. So we do a head starting program for desert tortoises at the zoo. And by that, what I mean is we work with some partners, including the San Diego Zoo, Edwards Air Force Base, and we get eggs that wild tortoises have laid, and we bring them to the zoo, and they're kept in this special area, contained there, very regulated. And they are with us for about 6 months at least. And in that time, we give them lots and lots of food. And so, in the 6 months or so that they're with us, they're able to, go from an initial hatchling to the size of a 2 to 3 year old tortoise. Um, and like I said, their shells don't get hard until they're 5, so that just makes them that much less vulnerable to ravens. And then after their 6 months with us, they're moved to these kind of like a soft release, if you will, on Edwards Air Force Base, where they're back in the desert, but there's like netting over them, and they get a chance to adapt to the desert, to be afraid of predators. And then after about 6 months or so there, they're fully released back out into the wild. And so these types of projects that are more biological are like very much needed to help supplement desert tortoise populations. But we like to say that, what's the point of head starting all of these tortoises to release back into the wild if we're not doing anything to address raven management, and they're all just going to get eaten, right? And so if we can do these community engagement projects that reduce food subsidies for ravens, help bring that density down back towards a more natural level, then these head-started tortoises are going to have a much better chance. Or same if we're releasing tortoises, but there's an area of where people are off-roading and don't even know it's desert tortoise habitat, um, you know, don't know not to throw their food waste, don't know not to touch them. We're going to be on a hamster wheel, right? And so I think both aspects are super important for conservation and really can be used together to forward conservation success and have more lasting impacts.
And it's really that holistic approach, bringing in the biological, ecological, social, and that community engagement element. Because, like you said, it would be unethical to release these tortoises, these baby tortoises in the wild without first addressing what it is that is causing these tortoises to go extinct in the first place. So I
Yeah.
think the Head Starting program is a great parallel to your social science initiatives. Have you guys been able to get enough funding for that to move forward with it? I know last time I was at the zoo, you guys were talking about how it was sort of like a shorter, stinted funded program, but is that looking more on the ground?
Uh,
And
since we're doing that in partnership with the San Diego Zoo, that one I think has been we've been pretty secure with
okay,
the funding on that. This is our fourth cohort, I want to
is that
say.
right? Okay,
It's something like that. Again, I'm the social scientist,
sure,
so
sure.
but but yeah, it's been at least four cohorts, I believe. And so yeah, that's not to say there aren't challenges still. So last year, it wasn't the funding that was an issue. It was after Hurricane Hillary that came through, there was all of this habitat disturbance, and it led to this overpopulation of fire ants, which were actually getting into nests and destroying the tortoise eggs
Really?
before our teams could even get to them to collect them for head starting. And so our cohort last year that we had did the head starting with was about half the size of other ones because there was such high mortality from fire ants, which had never been seen before. So conservation is really just whether it's people or the ecosystem, just constantly adapting to new challenges, pivoting, figuring out how to make a new plan work. Um, yeah.
Wow. So has the fire ant issue subsided?
It's still an issue, but now that they know about it, there's been really proactive, like nest tracking, monitoring, assessing. They were able to get the eggs a bit earlier this year before they had that level of mortality. And then I think we had them in incubators for a stretch, and then they were hatching at the zoo. So. Yeah, still a concern. Still a new threat, but learning how to adapt to that and pivot accordingly.
So with this Head Start program, is there any focus on getting the tortoises to understand to essentially hide from ravens or recognize a raven call? Like, are you guys able to sort of implement that into their survival instincts?
I believe that's all part of what they do in the soft release up in Edwards, where they're in outdoor pens for many months. Again, I'm not directly involved on that project, and so I can't answer exact specifics about that. But the idea is they do have that soft release to prepare them for being fully released back out in the wild.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, if you ever need any help I know you're not directly on that team, but I would love to be part of a Head Start program. I think it's so
I know
cool.
the babies are so cute.
Tortoise hatchlings are like ranked the cutest babies of all time.
Yeah, yeah, they really are.
Yeah. I'll never forget going behind the scenes, and I actually got to see some of this Head Start program in action during the International Desert Conservation Summit that you guys hosted back in the winter of 2024 in February. And I was just so excited to be behind the scenes and seeing this kind of Head Start program really be pioneered. I mean, it's only been ongoing for a few years now. So it just felt like this exciting energy around like, wow, look at these babies. They're surviving. We're going to help them survive. And this program is definitely a really great, you know, way to make sure that they are released back into the wild, healthy, ready to beat all odds against ravens. And it gave me a lot of hope for sure. And everyone wants to see a tortoise hatchling.
Yeah, yeah. I think they're huge draw for visitors at the zoo. You can see them in their special room as a zoo guest when we have them. So that's pretty neat. We have our current cohort until the end of the month, and then should get a new cohort in the fall again. But yeah, I mean it's a really neat project, and again, just part of that puzzle of one additional way to supplement the population and help this species that's unfortunately declined so steeply.
What are some action steps that our listeners tuning in right now can take who maybe want to support the Living Desert Zoo's conservation efforts from afar?
Yeah, I mean, if you're not out here in the desert with us, um, I mean, we do have folks from all over the country, even the world, that come to recreate here. So even if you don't live here and you come out here to recreate, learning about this can be really important. We've got there's an off-roading event called King of the Hammers that has 80 to 100,000 people that show up in the desert for a week and a half of off-roading events. And it's people, like I said, from all over the world. And so, even if you're just coming to recreate, learning about the local ecosystem, um, supporting any sort of policies or legislation that helps. Um, just getting some sort of environmental training out to folks that can be of use. Donating to the zoo or other nonprofits that work on desert tortoise conservation, just so that there's continued resources to continue these projects.
Let's say someone wants to get involved. What are some steps that they can take to reach out to the Living Desert, or what does that look like?
So the Living Desert's website, livingdesert.org, lists all of our conservation projects, which are across the globe. And as I mentioned before, for this desert tortoise project, we have the coveryourtrash.org website more specifically with more information there. And so you can reach out through the Living Desert's website if you've got any additional questions. So, like I said, just being a voice, being an advocate here can be really helpful. There's a handful of us that are going around to try and talk to as many folks as possible, but we are but a few scientists. And so, having people use their voice and advocate for the desert tortoise, I think, is really helpful. Like that volunteer that, was really frustrated by this shopping center leaving food waste out all the time. Again, like getting the city involved, letting them know, hey, there's an issue here. Like we have these health codes that this is violating beyond just the other environmental impacts. as I mentioned, being an advocate for something in your city, like requiring raven-proof enclosures around dumpsters. People are going to have the power when they're the residents and they're calling for these actions. Um, even just little things like if you visit our website and make a point of supporting Gold Star Award restaurants and thanking them for their efforts, um, you know, uh, just providing that social reinforcement, keeping your own trash bins closed and clean, making sure that you're not providing any other sources of food or water for ravens that support this increased population. All stuff that you can pretty easily do by yourself, but really, like, if we get this shift towards these behaviors, could really make a big difference.
I think one easy way is if you do visit these areas and you do go to a restaurant with this gold standard, maybe putting it in the like review in the Google or Yelp review.
Yeah, 100%.
Mention the gold standard in that review because I mean that is like one thing that restaurant owners will like strive to maintain or they look at those reviews and they're very impacted by the reviews of their patrons. So I think that could be a super easy way to use your voice and have lasting impact because that review is going to stay there.
Yeah, I love that idea. So, yes, please visit our website for the restaurants and support them and thank them and leave those reviews encouraging them to keep up the good work.
Speaking of keeping up the good work, thank you for all of the work that you're doing for the desert community and the desert tortoise. What is something that you'd like to leave our listeners with that gives you hope? What is something that inspires you, whether it be an environmental quote or story or art piece? What is something that you can leave us with?
I mean, I just encourage people to take some time to get out into nature in whatever way they can. Nature itself has, I think, been the biggest inspiration for me. It was on a backpacking trip where I was just out in the wilderness for 10 days that really like was when I solidified my decision to go back to grad school to get into the field of conservation. And I think just being out in nature is so powerful and that can be in different ways. That doesn't mean you have to backpack for 10 days into the middle of nowhere. But even just appreciating what's in your neighborhood. Even if you're plant a couple plants at home, but just find some way to connect and just appreciate just the beauty and the incredible range of species and living things that are on this planet. I don't know. For me, that's what's most motivating for me. Seeing all these things that need our help and that we need to protect.
Well said. I couldn't agree with you more. It's really that alone time in nature, and a backpacking trip will do it to you too. Really
Absolutely.
and invite that self-inquiry in and realize that we are part of this beautiful landscape, and what can we do to service the environment? How can we be a steward to it and connect? It all starts with connection with ourself and nature because we are nature.
Exactly. And yeah, that can happen in all different ways. Even just um, walking my dog in my neighborhood, there's this one tree where there's reliably this one bird singing in the morning. And just appreciating little things like that, even. You don't have to, trek off
Right.
into the wilderness. There's things all around us that we can appreciate, I think.
Go for a walk without headphones or your phone.
Yeah,
just
yeah,
be in nature, invite the sounds in, invite the smells, the breeze, the sun, all of it.
yeah, absolutely.
There's almost always something that you're gonna see for the first time, even on a walk that you've done a million times. There's always gonna be something that you notice that you've never noticed before, and it'll spark a little joy in your day, most likely. And I love the advice to maybe garden and research some native plants in your area, and maybe that can be a way that you can invite like native birds, maybe not ravens, but um, it's great advice. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katie. We really appreciate you diving in about all things dumpsters and time to talk trash and the complexities of just desert tortoise threats and what we can all do from afar or in our backyard to make a difference.
Yeah, thanks. It's been fun, and hopefully people feel a little more inspired to help our state reptile, the slowpokes that are living in our backyard here.
On today's Anxiety into Action, we encourage you all to educate yourselves on what it means to get involved as a volunteer on the Time to Talk Trash campaign. You can find out more about that through the Living Desert Zoo website. Again, we have all those resources in the show notes. But if you're not from SoCal, you can always look into other zoos and initiatives that you are interested in volunteering with. That is a great way to get started in your career as well as an early conservationist. Volunteering, getting behind the scenes, that's always the best way to start.
Yeah, and also if you are visiting Joshua Tree, the Coachella Valley, Palm Desert, make sure that you're looking for that gold standard that we talk about in this episode when you are going to restaurants. They should have a sticker outside. They might have it on Yelp. And also, speaking of Yelp and just Google reviews in general, give them a really good, glowing Google and Yelp review. It will make a difference for the restaurant. And also, it will set a precedent of other restaurants that should get involved in these initiatives.
Such a good point. And the Gold Star Award was actually something that I saw at the Roadrunner Cafe. It was a little pamphlet. And it had a fascinating fact about ravens and how their population has basically tripled. And that was years ago that I saw that pamphlet. That was before I even did desert tortoise research. And I just remember being so fascinated by that. And here we are today, a few years later, and the campaign is up and running strong. They have so many Gold Star awarded restaurants on their list. Definitely go check out those restaurants and give them a good review.
And to your point, too, about volunteering, if you don't live in Southern California, if you don't live in the desert here with the Living Desert Zoo, check out your zoo and maybe tell them about this campaign that they have and that you've heard about with the Living Desert Zoo. Show them this model that they have going on, and maybe there's a social, ecological issue near you. Chances are, I mean, trash affects so many different walks of life, whether it be humans or other wildlife that is not necessarily ravens and desert tortoises. But maybe this is something that can be like a standard across like zoos and different restaurants. So
Yeah, that's a good point.
you could be that person that starts it.
I love that. Another action piece you can take when you visit the desert, and we touch on it a little bit throughout the season, but I always want to encourage people to check under their cars. If you are visiting Joshua Tree, the Mojave National Preserve, just driving to the desert, and if you're on BLM land, chances are there could be desert tortoises near you. And in the spring and the fall is when tortoises are most active. So April and May, September, October, a little bit of November, they will seek shade beneath your vehicle. I have seen it. I have had to remove one before from my tires. They like to sit right by your tire. And so do snakes. Don't pick up a snake, and don't pick up a tortoise either. But there are ways to be vigilant. And if it's in harm's way and could be killed, it is better to remove the animal. If you have gloves, please wear them. We do not want to be responsible for transmitting any zoonotic disease or any human disease. Maybe you have a pet that you've been handling. You don't want to transfer any of that whatever your dog has or cat has that you might not even know to an animal under your car, a wild animal. So check your cars.
And if you're in that area and that happens to you, call Danielle Wall.
Also true. Another great action piece.
She'll be there for you.
She
So
will be. Love that. Yes. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Planet People. We are thrilled to have you as part of our community of wildlifers who care about protecting the planet for future generations to enjoy.
We hope that by listening, you feel inspired to connect with nature and become a steward of the planet by getting involved and taking action with your local community conservation organizations. Until next time, stay positive, Planet People.
This episode was produced by Natalie Jean Sybil, Coral Carson, and Hugh Carr. Directed and edited by Coral Carson. Theme song by Hugh Carr under the artist name Flama. Thank you, team.